Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
It was just one of those things where it was all back on me. So really being humbled, now through my business ventures and all these things, I really see it in a different light of what he was trying to do. And wish I could have become out of a little bit better basketball player. But at the same time, I do have a genuine love for the game. It's just like it's an unbelievable creative game. So that's really, that's, I guess, in a nutshell to answer your question.
Welcome to the Rise of the Challenge podcast. Joining today, he's the host of Fueled podcast and entrepreneur. It's Matthew Tack. How are you doing today, Matthew?
That one's for sure a tongue twister. I'm telling you, it happens to me too and everyone else. I'm doing phenomenal. So good to be with you, Alex.
We're so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Yeah, man. Right from the beginning. Well, I was born and raised in southeastern Michigan. Actually right outside of Detroit. So about 50 miles outside of Detroit, a little town called Sterling Heights, Michigan. Uh, and growing up, it was all basketball. I played basketball all the time. It was sports. Just always had a ball in my hands. Figured things out. My dad was a basketball coach growing up, and was always in the gym with him. I think it was more so I grew my love for the game of basketball. I was a bad little kid, and so my grandma. I don't think I knew my first name from my grandmother until I was probably 15. She called me little shit. So uh, my mom always kicked me with my dad, and I was in the gym all the time. So that's where things started for me. They were I just always had a ball in my hands, and born and raised. Love Michigan. Actually, just got back from Michigan last night.
With playing basketball, what was it about it that you enjoyed the most? Was that sport that you kind of focused on or kind of wanted to play as many years as you could, or did you kind of want to switch it up?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I played a number of different sports growing up. So I played baseball. I did play soccer too. One sport I never played was football. And to be honest with you, uh, I like had the build for football. I was a kind of a muscular kid growing up. Got into weights probably when I was roughly around like 15 or 16. Um, but it was one of those things where my dad scared me like all the time. Like my dad was like, if you want to play football, you're going to have to give up a basketball season. That's what he would always tell me. Because all these kids playing football would come into basketball season all banged up. Football is just a rough sport. And, I don't actually today, I don't fault him for that. I really think that football is truly a violent sport. I think that it really impacts the head. Just like this is all you got, man. You got to really protect that, and football is just that odd game where people love the entertainment of it, but I do not envy the players that just get hit. And so all the other sports where soccer, I guess you can kind of the same thing with all the headers. I did love heading. Probably got a few concussions from that, but basketball, what drew me to it, I would have to say what drew me to it was just the competitive nature of it, right? I was an all out, balls out kind of kid, and one of the things that my dad had growing up, he loved Pistol Pete Maravich, and Pistol Pete Maravich, like always had a ball in his hands. I watched a documentary on him, and he, was just always practicing dribbling. So I would go down into the basement and I would do the figure eight drills. I'd do the spider drills. I'd do really everything develop my hand eye coordination and really, ultimately just like the day to day of my parents put a basketball hoop in, my backyard. And it was just something that I just loved doing. I would go out in the winters and you'd see me with gloves on, just shooting sometimes without my gloves. And I remember my knuckles just getting just so frayed and they would crack open all the time, just cause I would be outside. But, it was just one of those things that I consistently did, day after day. We'd go to camps. I'd go, 5-star basketball camps. I go down to Kentucky, and it was just something that I did. I truly fell in love with, but ultimately I got burned out from too. So
I can just imagine Michigan winters and you're out there just shooting the ball in like snow or what cold weather. I can already imagine that because especially in the Midwest, like our winters, it's a hit or miss what it's going to happen. But with basketball, was that something that kind of brought you and your dad close, or was that like a bonding kind of activity?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think at times it was a love-hate relationship. With my dad growing up, my dad, my dad's a phenomenal dad. So I should clear that up. He's like one of the most amazing guys that I've ever met. I really look up to him. But my dad, like that was always my dad was a two-sport athlete, University of North Dakota. Um, he's 6'6". He's a big guy. He's 5 inches taller than me. Uh, and my dad never had my athleticism, but my dad was a workhorse. And
Mm,
so my dad got a scholarship, and that was something that I always envied. I'm like, I want to get a scholarship. I want to get a scholarship. But the way that my dad, and I think a lot of people, just a lot of guys never really reconcile with how their dad like really parented them growing up. But it was always this perfectionist mentality of like, I never did quite good enough in a game. And so my dad would always be like, "Hey, you could have went backdoor here. You had a couple turnovers here." And I always took at that as a critic instead of him helping me and wanting to get better. And now that I think about it today, so like, I'm 30 in my late 30s now, but with thinking about it today, I think that's really if I had a better mindset of like how my dad was coaching me along and I wasn't looking at he was criticizing me, but he was helping me as far as like what I could kind of like take away from and get a little bit better. But I just turned into this hothead where like it was all about me. I wanted to score the basketball. That's not how my dad played the game. My dad was like a rebounder and he was an assist maker. And so that's where he was coming from was like to help me be a better scorer, but also be a better rebounder and passer and all these things. And yet like I was very cynical and like I wanted the ball all the time. And we can get to this later, but my love for basketball has grown because I'm still playing in my late 30s. But now the game of basketball to me is I'm like I can facilitate a lot better and bring the guys into the game and really get them to enjoy the game. And that's where I see the love of like basketball is it's like a team sport and in business and everything else is when you can get the collective going in one motion to the vision. Man, there's no better feeling than that. But when you're trying out there score for yourself and pad the stat sheet, like, and it's all in it for you, like it doesn't like, yeah, I like scored 30 points that game, but I did it, right? And I would have much now knowing like this now, like retro hindsight's 2020, I would have loved for to score 15 points and had my big man score 15 and me generate 8 to 10 assists out of that and we won the game by 20 because he's feeling good, I'm feeling good. My point guard's feeling good cuz I shot the ball well too. Those things when everyone's in this like rhythm, it's an amazing feeling. But so the way my dad coached me, I took it as like he's criticizing me like, why couldn't you see that reverse layup that I took him right, I took him off the right side off of two dribbles and, came up with my left. And, it was just one of those things where it was all back on me. So really being humbled, now through my business ventures and all these things, I really see it in a different light of what he was trying to do, and wish I could have become out of a little bit better basketball player. But at the same time, I do have a genuine love for the game. It's just like it's an unbelievable creative game. So that's really, that's I guess in a nutshell to answer your question.
Well, especially at a young age, a lot of kids can relate. Like they want to be that MVP of the team. Like they want to be the sole person. But at the time we're recording this with the Olympics going on, you think about the basketball team. Like we have all these legends and all stars. And if they only thought about themselves, would they win the gold medal? No. They all work together. And kind of how you mentioned as you were getting older, and how you realize how the team aspect really could make a huge difference where everyone working together can relate to the business world where everyone on the team helps to reach that goal, not just one person reaches that goal. Sometimes we're growing up and we always have that dream job. What was that dream job for you growing up that you always wanted?
Yeah, that's so funny you asked that. I'm getting a little nostalgic right now. I at one point, I don't know when it was, but I went to like a big city, right? And I saw these like guys in suits, and I'm like, man, holding a briefcase. And I'm like, man, I'm gonna go to a big city one day and work. And I didn't even know what it was gonna be, but I'm like, I'm gonna go to a big city. And I didn't really have that, ideal like growing up, but it was at a like super young age. I remember being like, it was almost like 10 or 11 or something like that, and I was like, I'm going to go to a big city and work. And I did move to Washington D.C. after college, and it was cool to experience because I did live that big city life, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that was before I became an entrepreneur. And I worked for this company called Accenture, and it was a really fun environment. I had some great jobs there. I worked in earned value management, so I graduated in finance from Oakland University of Rochester, Michigan, and then went to DC. And so when I was working there, I like that was it. It kind of came back to me that I was
Mhm.
like, oh, now I'm in this like suit and tie. And then when I got there, I hated it. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, I am not a suit and tie kind of guy. You should see me today. Usually I'm not even in a gray shirt. I'm in all in black, but Florida is Florida, you are sweating nonstop right now. It's so hot. Um, but that was kind of it. But before that, it was absolutely I wanted to, it was every kid's dream. I wanted to go to the NBA. That was my thing. I just picked up a basketball every day to work at that dream. And to be honest with you, I think if the chips fell in a little bit different directions, and I had a little bit better mindset, I think I had the skills to like at least make it to like European ball.
Mhm.
That didn't happen, but that's a part of my story, and I don't regret it. I live an amazing life.
With moving to Washington, D.C., living that suit life, that kind of working for a company, not liking it over time, did that play an effect with your personal life? Kind of like, well, if I'm not liking it here, like I got to get out of it. Did it carry over to the other side? Because a lot of times people can't balance the work life and the personal life.
So, man, you asked some phenomenal questions here because this is really taking me back. But when I was 26, well, actually from like 22 ish to like about 26, when I was working in the corporate environment. The reason why I hated it is because I didn't really love the idea of like the corporate political structure.
Mhm.
I wanted to be like competitive, but like I felt like it wasn't real like competitive. Like I couldn't get my athletic juice out of there. And I really went to a state of depression. I had a really negative mindset. I was coming out. I was like, didn't really have kind of like my way with life. It's like, where is that competitiveness coming out in me? And I felt like it couldn't be released really at work. Um, I did work really hard. Like I was actually a personal trainer in the mornings, and then I would go over and work for Accenture during the day. So I did these things, I maintained activity, but I was in a very like low state. And I would say it was depression at the end of the day. I was always like thinking, grass is greener on the other side. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Um, and I always tell people, you know, that state, like, is what really led me to entrepreneurism. Like, that going through that and battling through that really led me on the other side to, like, I think I need to try this out. I think I need to try the entrepreneur lifestyle out. So, that's ultimately what, like, kinda led me there as far as that drive was, like, I gotta find something to really pull out this creativity and this competitiveness in me, and that's where, I've since kind of like thrived in the entrepreneurship world.
What was that first kind of entrepreneurial idea that you had that you wanted to kind of go forward with?
Yes, super basic. I guess I was a kind of on the leading side, maybe a little bit, but in 2014 time period, we bought a house, and then we got like there was they call it like mother-in-law suites here in Tampa,
Mhm.
so it was like a little apartment behind the house. And I did my first like renovation on that. And then my wife brought this thing up called like, well, maybe we should Airbnb it. And I'm like, well, what's Airbnb? 2014. It's like, what's Airbnb? And so we looked into it, and we put it on Airbnb, and we were the first of like I think, we were one of the first of like 50 people in all of Tampa Bay to start utilizing Airbnb. And I'm like, man, bookings just coming through like crazy. I'm like, this is pretty wild. I was like, maybe I should try to do this again. And so I started getting into like house hacking. And so we moved, and then I essentially built a tiny house in our backyard and started renting that out. And then I bought another house in St. Petersburg, Florida, and which had an in-law suite. And I renovated that and turned that into it, and then I started up like a small management company for other Airbnbs. And so I just had, that was my kind of first world that I lived in, was this Airbnb hoteling piece that I did for a couple of years. That was my first act in entrepreneurism. So that was the first thing that kind of led me into where I am today.
Is it wild to think from when you were doing the Airbnb to now looking at where it's come from, like the how the rise has gone with it? Are you still doing the Airbnb?
No, we exited out of all of our Airbnbs. We sold them all off. Um, it is insane, right? And I think that's truly what sparked my level of curiosity. Was I really, I really wanted to learn more about real estate. Like once I got into it, because I'm like, I didn't even learn like what house hacking was
Mhm.
until I got into it. And I'm like, oh, this is what you call house hacking. Um, but then I wanted to learn like, okay, what are capital trends and how do you raise capital and how you do various things. And so that's ultimately how I kind of like started investing in real estate. I have a couple real estate projects that I work on right now. Obviously, that's not my main thing, but yeah, it's just how to read a proper balance sheet, how to read a P&L, manage cash flow, all those things like I didn't even think about in that environment, but now running a business is a lot different, right? And so it just kind of gave me, you can learn a lot of things in school, but until you get in the weeds is when
Yeah.
you really learn these things. And so that's really was my like first start of that. But man, I like my mind, I did not know like how much I could download into my brain in a very finite period of time. But when you're reading and you're asking for help and you're helping others, it opens up your world to much different things and to learn along the way. So that's what I love about everyone's story and how you can learn from them.
And you mentioned you were doing this with your wife, if that was correct. Like you were doing
I,
the Airbnb stuff, like kind of investment renovating with her.
Not really. So my wife, although she's been my biggest cheerleader, and she has some really great ideas, she typically doesn't get in the business world. She loves her 9 to 5. She's an attorney, but she always helps when help is needed. But no, when I was in that Airbnb world, trust me, I was scrubbing toilets if the cleaners didn't show up. She wasn't scrubbing those toilets at all. So I mean, I did anything that was needed to be done. But no, she would she would help in some capacity as far as like creativity, but no, it was mainly me just getting at the grind.
Did going in that route, the entrepreneur, affect your guys' relationship with kind of like you're putting money into this, hoping to recoup it back, and kind of you're taking a risk almost because you don't know, are people going to book dates and things like that? Or the support that she had for you and for each other kind of helped you kind of ease into it and kind of know we're going to make this work no matter what. Because you kind of talked about being the competitor, like you're going to do anything to make it happen. How was that dynamic for you guys?
Man, that is such an imperative question when guys look for women, right? That if you're going to become an entrepreneur, man, you got to have a strong woman by your side. I would say I lean on the side. I'm a very aggressive and competitive, but at the same time, I'm like, babe, is this the right thing to do? And then she's the challenger of that, right?
Mhm.
And so like she's so strong in her own right, and we balance each other out so well. And I mean, I couldn't ask for a better soulmate. I mean, she's like my absolute best friend. Love hanging out with her. We get to raise three daughters now together. Um, so I would say that it was challenging, but like, you know, sink, swim, come hell or high water, she was gonna stand by my side, whether I fail or not. And trust me, I've failed. So there's been plenty of interactions where like it's become like super testy and I have to figure things out. But we live in a world where everything is figure outable. And I think that's really where our faith really comes into, I shouldn't say I think, I know, because we pray through things and we figured things out, but like we want ultimately what we, our main goal is to protect the peace of our household and maintain that level of love. And it's really important to cultivate that in our environment with our three girls now. So, if anything, it's really brought us together. There has been some really, really challenging times. I would say, like maybe we're in one of those seasons right now with a couple startups, but it's at the same time it's she's been rock solid, and, if I would encourage any guy listening out there looking for a woman, um, make sure make sure she ebbs and flows with you really well, and, she supports you in whatever endeavors you wanna take on.
Similar to how you were in the corporate world, with being an entrepreneur, were you always kind of looking for what was next? Like you're going through these investment properties and doing those kind of things. We're always thinking, could I do something else in a different space as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you know what? I think that's probably one of been my biggest struggles, to be honest with you. I think that, there's always the shiny object syndrome. And then you're like, whoa, here and there and here. You know what I mean? And one of the great quotes by Steve Jobs and Warren Buffett was, I think both of them were asked at one time. They were, what is your greatest asset? What was one of the things that you're going to write down as your greatest assets? And they both put down there in some form or another focus, right? And when you can really hone in and focus on that one thing and be really good at that one thing, man, like get really really good at that one thing. And so, with real estate, it's always like that, right? It's always like the shiny object syndrome. Like you're going here and there, like, well, I can do this, and here's another project. And you always think you can do all these things, but really at the end of the day, what is it that really is going to be number one, your passion? Like, and if you can, I always encourage people like find something you can make money at. And if you're passionate about it too, man, that's gonna level you up because you can sustain that and do it for the long term. Um, and then, but if it's also that one thing, maybe it's a job and then you're doing a side hustle, make sure your side hustle is the passion. And then maybe your job just gets you through it until your side hustle outweighs your job. And then you transition over to that and you can maintain it a lot longer. So, for me, it's, what I'm trying to do now really is just dial in and focus on the things that we're really good at right now. And there's going to be, there is ancillaries that we do. So right now we're focused on, that optimized coaching for guys really over like 35. So I'm really passionate about that because I think health is very much needed in this world. More than anything, if you treat your body right, I guarantee you can get through a lot of mental health crisis. And there's a major mental health crisis we got going on right now. So, we focus on mindset, nutrition, and muscle. So that's my main thing that I'm working on right now, and that's where just that focus comes in, as far as really just dialing down and focusing on that, so we can elevate others. But real estate, I learned very quickly how to transition from Airbnbs. I got into multifamily syndications, where I was the asset manager, and we pivoted around a couple apartment buildings, retail strip center, and then we raised some capital for other syndications within the southeast portion of the United States. And then I started up essentially a flip company where we wholesaled and flipped real estate for a number of years. So again, you're like I was going. I had a big project here. I had a wholesale division here, and I was running quick, really quick. But when you can really hone in that passion and that focus, that's a really really big thing that I think is imperative for really everybody.
You talked about in the corporate world mental health, going through depression and things like that. How was your mental health going through all the next chapter that you were going through? Did you kind of see changes? Were you having those internal struggles that led to challenges personally? Or what was going on through those times?
Which time frame? So in
So the next
yeah.
chapter would be the entrepreneurial aspect. Did you kind of get notice like a change in mental health and kind of an increase in not feeling depressed, or there's some internal challenges that were still coming out that you were still battling?
Yeah, no, I think there always is that, right? There's ebbs and flows. I think it's always the power of reflection. I choose to do that every morning. I was actually on a podcast or a little earlier today, and it was, it's one of these things where, so often that we forget to just pause
Mhm,
and reflect on, what did we just learn? Maybe we failed at something, maybe we grew from something, maybe we won, and like, did we take time to reflect on why that was? What happened? And to really dial that in and challenge that a little bit, rise to the challenge, right? How do we come back and reflect? Do we reflect daily? Do we reflect often? Do we write things down? That's one thing that I need to get better at and constantly improving on. And one thing that helps me is writing a weekly newsletter just to get my thoughts out on paper and get it into the universe and the world. And so I often write to do that, that helps quite a bit, right? Just in the process of thinking. Yeah, there are, at the end of the day, that's what this logo means, is that there's going to be hills and valleys in life, and so there's going to be mental challenges along the way. But as Aubrey Huff, a great baseball player, once said, it's like, how do we not strike out the next time, right? How do
mhm.
we shorten our gap in the amount of strikeouts we have? If we can be a 300 hitter, man, that's a Hall of Fame hitter right there.
Yep.
And so sometimes it's taking the ball to left field, because we just need to get a base hit next time up, right? It's not going for the stands because we just don't have the confidence for that right now. And so with entrepreneurism, yes, like, I mean, I would say I have a mental health challenge every day, in terms of like how I walk into the day. But there's then stacks and precursors that I put in place now to really make sure that I'm performing at optimal levels. And so even as I get older, there's things that I put in to make sure that, hey, like, I need to do this. This is a priority that I'm scheduling to make sure my mental health is where it needs to be. And so that's why I make sure that, you know, taking my proper supplementation, taking my peptides, taking my TRT, taking working out is ultimately going to elevate me throughout the day, because that's a major component to my overall mental health. So point being, it's probably a long way of explaining it. It's a daily challenge,
Mhm,
hands down, in entrepreneurism. And I definitely say entrepreneurism not for everybody, but like, being an entrepreneur, there's going to be a daily mental challenge, and it's really fighting through that, and in figuring out what the end goal is. And I explain it like this. I wrote, something today. Steve Jobs had something very pronounced because he died at 56. But I try to reverse engineer my 85-year-old self almost daily, and so I put myself into my 85-year-old self shoes, and I was like, well, what would my 85-year-old self be proud of? And so he would definitely be proud of me for working out. I'll tell you that much. Building a little bit more lean muscle, that's what he would be proud of. And then, but getting proper hydration, how am I fueling it? Food is my medicine. And then ultimately, how I'm treating my wife and girls. I'm a much different person, 8, 10, heck, 3 years ago than I am today, as far as how I react to discipline with my girls and how I'm able to, like, more controlled over myself. And that's part of the challenge being a parent. I want to parent like my dad did. Hey, I'm going to spank you, right? Or like, how can I get down on your eye level? I say all the time, I'm sorry to my girls as far as like how I react towards something. And so it's those daily disciplines that we're building in place that ultimately, protect my mental health at the end of the day. I don't want to come home screaming at my girls, because I that's not how I want to be perceived by them. So I'll give you an example. Today, my middle daughter, I was eating a plate of food and I had it held up, and she came over and tried to give me a hug, and she just kicked the whole plate of food over. I like I wanted to be furious. I'm like, "Man," she was trying to give me a hug at the end of the day, and she ran off to her room, and I just talked to her. I was like, "Well, you're trying to give me a hug." I was like, "Do you want a hug now?" I was like, "I wasn't mad at you." I was like, "But you coulda helped me clean it up." Um, but at the end of the day, it's like one of those things of how I want them to perceive me, and I think that's a major part of, like, mental health too, because, like, if you aren't cognizant and reflecting on those things of how I can improve, then, like, then that ultimately, that is going to cater towards like these negative patterns or negative thoughts. And I was like, man, I really want things to go in that other direction. I want things to go where perceive them to be, which is a level of optimism. So that's what I try to promote a lot of.
Leading into your family, what has fatherhood taught you about yourself, and kind of what has been your favorite part about fatherhood?
Yeah, so 3 girls is very challenging, is very, very challenging. So, fatherhood is one of the most remarkable things that I've ever experienced, like, obviously, in my life. I don't believe you can have the highest highs and the lowest lows as being a dad. Um, but, patience is, like, one of the most, like, critical things that I think I've developed in terms of, like I just aforementioned, how I react to things, but then how I'm, like, really cultivating a soul. I really do, I get to name that person, for life, and so I shouldn't say I named them, my wife for sure named them, but, like, she named them, she branded them, right? Genevieve is gonna be Genevieve likely for life unless she decides to change it. Melina is gonna be Melina for life, and Emery is gonna be Emery. And so then it's gonna be like, how do I cultivate and shape their soul? Because they're so unique in every way. The oldest, naturally, just because of where she's born, she's going to lead a little bit differently. And then my middle child, which I'm a middle child, so I call her my favorite because these middle kids need to stick together. But Melina has to, she's going to perceive the world a little bit differently because she has an older sister. And then Emery, she's the youngest, and she's going to perceive the world, and for a couple different reasons. She was a COVID baby, and she has two older sisters ahead of her. So, like, their perception of the world is kind of crazy. And if you ever read this book, I believe it was by Stephen Hawkins. It could have been, I could have been wrong on the author, but he wrote this book in terms of, actually, no, no, no. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell and Tipping Point basically shows like different things of how we perceive the world of far like economic crises, presidential, yeah, John F. Kennedy getting shot, all these different things. They kind of shape going through World War II versus somebody in the Industrial Revolution versus somebody going through COVID, right? We
Mhm.
perceive the world in a different way because of where we were born. And so it's just like that, the idea of really understanding and cultivating the soul that I now have the responsibility of is really, really important for every man, right? And so, and how I guide that soul and prepare that soul for them to go off is one of the most important things that I think like God has given me in terms of responsibility and care. So I take that to the level of like the highest degree.
So I want to transition into from one podcast host to another podcast host.
Okay.
I got the tongue twister when I introduced Full Fueled Podcast. Where was the creation of that? And was this always a dream of yours, or is it one of those opportunities that came about?
Yeah, it was so the Full Field podcast. I had a podcast in 2020, loved it, had a co-host with it. And honestly, I just did it to kind of put my voice out there to just help people through the process of COVID. Because I just felt like it was extremely important. A lot of people were struggling. And I always wanted to do it again.
Mhm.
And so, but I wanted to do it in a manner that was a little bit more focused on the health and wholeness piece. So we operate within pillars. We want to just focus on fuel, nutrition, spirit, mind, work. And that was one of the things that like my buddy and I got together. We had met way back when, actually at church. He moved to Colorado Springs, knew him briefly, came back. We actually met at a co working space. And I was looking for like a podcast host because I was like, man, I want to start up another podcast and do something like cool. I wanted to make sure I did it right as well. And so, anyways, we kind of put our heads together. He was interested in doing it. And then we did a couple episodes and we had just some great synergy of what we wanted to talk about and just everything. And so we're like, how about, we spur this up and make this a real thing. And so we're about 50 episodes in now and having fun with it. But I wouldn't say it was like a dream, but it is something that we genuinely just love to do.
Is there anything that you've talked about on the show that maybe people that you know or people that maybe follow you or maybe surprised to hear you talk about, or kind of your insight on an experience that you've gone through? Because sometimes I can say my family listens to this and they're like, I didn't know that about you. So it kind of brings up things that they didn't even know. Have you had that moment for yourself?
Yeah, I think that I've been very transparent now. And this was really within the past few years, but as I like expose it more and more on public platforms of just the season I was in when I was like 24, 25, and really going through like a trying season of life and just like the mental escape that I was trying to get out of. Um, that it was just like I was depressed and did not feel good, and I don't think my mom or anyone ever knew that that I was like that I was that just depressed and did like I didn't have like a meaning. Felt like I didn't have a meaning in life. um, and so that was one of the things that I've just been more bold because, at the end of the day, we have one life to live, and why not live it as transparently as physically possible? Because the more transparent you can be with yourself, the more you can help other people. And so that probably is one of the big things. My mom has said something to me. I didn't know you were that depressed, and a lot of times people don't, right? I definitely didn't expose it. I wasn't like sleeping all the time and not coming out of my room. That was never the case. But I always talk about we all produce a feeling and an energy, and it wasn't a healthy energy for me at that time. I was not doing well, and but changed the narrative of that story pretty dramatically, and that's one of the things that probably has come out and been highlighted a little bit within our podcast in terms of that. I think everyone knows how bold I am about how everyone needs to optimize their health and they need to make sure that they're taking care of their bodies sooner rather than later. So I'm on my family for that. So I don't think that's anything new.
Fitness is a big part of your journey and your current what you do. Do you have a fitness goal or a challenge when it comes to fitness that you want to accomplish? Or do you have a personalized goal that you kind of talked about how the way that your physique or what your look is kind of that challenge to feel proud and feel like you can achieve anything?
Yeah, that's something that I've play a fine line when your physique mode, and which I am, I'm pretty dialed in right now. I know my body fat. I know what I'm putting into my body. I know how much protein we track through our app. So I got all my guys that I coach. I make sure that they know how to macro count, and what they're putting in their body. They know how much protein on a daily basis they're putting into their body. So like for me, I'll kind of explain the goals that I had the past couple of years. So, like last year, I was really big into autophagy. And if anyone that doesn't know what autophagy is, it basically is just depleting the nutrients out of your body. It's almost like a detox, where you're at a caloric deficit. Excuse me, at a caloric deficit. And, kind of the science behind that is that you're basically taking, degenerative cells and reversing them essentially and having them cause, be thriving. So the cells that are targeted by cancer cells are going to be your dying cells. So the idea behind autophagy is that you can basically regenerate new thriving cells in your body, have an abundance of them, and be feeling better. So I did that all last year. Do I believe in that now? Absolutely not. I do not believe in that. So it was actually pretty interesting. I cold plunged every day last year. First thing that I did when I got up in the morning, I would cold plunge for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. I would then go exercise. So I do a lot of functional training, meaning I incorporate kettlebell movements. So I do that. But this year changed up a little bit because it's kind of the science behind creating lean muscle mass versus being in a state of autophagy all the time. And so my main goal this year has been more physique related, where I'm building more lean muscle mass. I'm rounding out for sure, and loving every ounce of it. I'm not gonna lie. I love being kind of that more shredded physique, and then so that's been my main goal like this year is to maintain my cardiovascular capacity for total optimization, but then building on lean muscle mass at the same time. And so I do two different forms of training. I do functional based training 3 times a week, and that's kettlebell training. So it just allows my body to, the kinetic chain to move more and mobilize more. And then I do weightlift, which is a little bit more static based, I guess you could say, which has more dense weight associated to it, and that's where I build lean muscle mass. And so I'm putting more pounds on. It's not something where I needed to take pounds off. I actually was below my high school weight last year. I was at about 178 pounds. Um, and then this year has been completely different. So I'm roughly at about 204 pounds right now. I'm going to bump back up. I'm going to bump up to about 210, and then I'll probably lean out to about 205, 206. But one thing I say to that is strength is such a critical thing for the purposes of longevity. Yeah, I just, I thrive on the idea of like, well, how am I becoming more optimal for tomorrow? And what did I do today to become more optimal for tomorrow? And I'm a big believer that every man really should produce some level of strength to his capacity. And so Socrates had a quote, and maybe I can find it for you really quick. But Socrates had a quote that um, he basically was mentioning that how unfortunate it is for a man not to expose himself to the strength of his capacity. And so I love the idea of a man, exposing himself to the strength and the capacity at which like he never knew he had, right? And so that's one of the really cool things that I get to instruct guys through and coach them through is really pulling that out, pulling that almost like beast mode out of them, and then really challenging them to, start sculpting their physique into something that they're like, maybe their wife or their girlfriend or their mom, they're like, dang, you better work it out, you don't skip leg day or arm day, huh? And so I really do think that's a positive force in every man's life if he can really expose that level of strength.
As we've been on this journey with you, our listeners like to learn even more about our guests. When you're not working, what do you like to do for fun that maybe people don't know you like to enjoy?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So I do love, I love playing basketball. It is one of my things. It's like, but another thing that I absolutely like thrive on, and that's why I love going back to Michigan, is I love water skiing. Water skiing is just like I've learned how to slalom ski, so I can. I'm dropping a ski. I have gotten up a couple times on one ski, but just cutting across the wake is this like you hit this flow state when you're on the back of a boat and it's pulling you at 35 knots, and you're just like whipping across the wake and just having fun. Water skiing is just absolutely like epic to me. So beyond basketball and golf, I do really enjoy golf. I love the science behind golf and the mindset of it. But my kind of like one hobby that probably people don't know much about, like it as far as like something maybe I enjoy, I absolutely love water skiing.
I'm just lucky if I can even stand up on a water ski. I did before and I'm like, how do people do this? Like, I can't get up, but I listen to this, bro. I rise to the challenge and I keep on trying. But that's awesome that you do that because it's such a fun thing to just like be skiing. Like it's like when you go into like a snow mountain, like you enjoy going down that hill, water skiing when you're going through those waves. And like you mentioned, it's just a thrill. Like it's just like you're kind of on there, not thinking about anything, just enjoying it, kind of relaxing until you fall into the water. Then you're like, come on, I gotta go again.
Yeah, no, it is just like that. I mean, it is so epic. I mean, it's like coming down a mountain. You're exactly right. Like it's the same thing. I used to snowboard, but it's coming down like a mountain, but you're just being pulled by this boat cutting across the wake. It's really cool. It is painful though too. I took a pretty hard spill probably 3 weeks ago. And I had to get some peptides in me for sure, but I had a ski hit me in the rib and that thing was bruised for a solid couple weeks. So you do get the pain sometimes, but that is the challenge. It's so cool. I can't even explain to you just like when you're whipping across. I skied with some really good skiers actually this summer. I'm like, dang man, how did they do that? And so I'm always curious on how to get a little bit better at it. But it is just a fun thing to do, especially in the Midwest. There's nothing like Midwest summers and just being in those Midwest lakes and just fresh water, and everything about it's awesome.
The final question I'll ask you for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
Yeah, that's never give up. That's one of those things where it's like no matter what you're getting into, you got to get gritty. There's going to be obstacles that come along the way. There's no doubt, like no matter cycle you're in, if you're at the very beginning or the very top, there's always going to be hills and valleys. But as long as you remain consistent, right? Consistency is everything. And if you put yourself out there and get over your greatest fears, you just be present with fear. Fear's not going to leave, but being present with fear and just doing the hard things in life. So many people try to steer away from the hard things, getting into a cold plunge, staying in for 25 minutes into an infrared sauna, or even a sauna at that. Doing those hard things makes some of the other things a little bit easier. So, one of the challenges that I always say, make physical challenges for yourself. So those tend to be like really the most difficult. Getting yourself out of breath daily is something that, I try to do to get past those obstacles so that I can do like a hard thing, maybe a hard thing in business. It's calling up that person that that I need to call or whatever it is, do the hard thing, right? Do the hard things first because that's usually what's going to kind of push you forward and you're like, I can do this again and challenge yourself. So don't give up and do the hard things first.
Matthew, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure.
Tune in next time to hear my next guest talk about their rise to the challenge. Remember to follow, subscribe on all major audio platforms. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get full length episode video format. What path do you take to accomplish your goals? You decide.